You're listening to Puma Podcast.
I think that the country can be confident enough that Filipino players are good enough to learn and get better and compete with international talent. That the culture that grew over more than a century of basketball being played in the country is resilient enough to still be strong, no matter how many foreign players are allowed to participate. And in fact, we see that Filipino players are now honestly coveted as imports in other Asian leagues in Japan and Korea. So Filipino basketball culture is strong even in a global environment. That I think that the country's basketball leaders, who are often of an older, more traditional mindset, probably it's time to they've made concessions to it. I think it may be time to just embrace it.
Magandang araw, ako po si Jaemark Tordecilla, pumapodcast para sa Teka Teka, and joining us for a very special episode today is Rafe Bartholomew. You might remember him as an author, most recently of Basketball, A Love Story, 2 and 2, McSorley's My Dad and Me, and of course, the seminal book about Philippine basketball, Pacific Rims. Rafe, welcome to Teka Teka. Welcome back to Puma
The prodigal podcaster returns. Salamat, Jaemark. Good to talk to you. Nakakwelyo ako para sa inyo, for the listeners and viewers of Puma Podcast. But don't worry, below it's just joggers and chinelas.
Okay, I wish you hadn't told us that. We'll see kung later on, Rafe has this penchant for singing during his podcast appearances. Ewan ko kung mapapakanta natin siya today. But let's start at the very start. It's almost 20 years now. 19 years ago, almost, or 18 years ago, you wrote an article for the New York Times about college basketball in the Philippines. Now it's college basketball season again. I think that was the very first international article examining not just college basketball in the Philippines, but the Filipinos' love for basketball. Lumabas sa New York Times 18 years ago. How did you pull that off? That's kind of an out of left field na pitch at the time, especially.
It's close. Well, so actually, I had one article come out in the Times before then about Philippine basketball, but I guess in this trend has not changed too much over the last almost 20 years, and it's still, the gap may be widening, but that first article was about the PBA, so it did not get as much engagement from certainly the avid fans of college basketball who showed up to comment and make that like a trending story for the New York Times when that second story, the Ateneo Salle rivalry story, came out. It was so that the story almost always, for better or worse, happens to be you had a lucky connection. A friend of mine who I grew up with, went to grade school and high school with, from the same neighborhood as me in New York. Her mother was a clerk at the New York Times, which was a term they used back then for one of their reporters, but for whatever reason they were getting just the title clerk. Anyway, her mom was a clerk there, and she, when I moved to Manila with a Fulbright grant in 2005, almost 20 years ago, November, she was able to introduce me to their sports editor at the time, a editor named Tom Jolly, and said, "Hey, there's this interesting guy going over to the Philippines to study basketball there. Maybe he can write for you." And so I got to meet with him, and he said, "Keep in touch. If you have ideas, don't be afraid to reach out." So the first story I was able to write there was about imports in the PBA. It was about at the time what I think it's hard to imagine the mind frame I was in back then, because I was so new to the country and to Philippine basketball culture. But it was one of the first things that surprised me coming from the States about the PBA, which is the way that teams cycle through imports very fast, and so it was all about you know, a great place to play if you can stick around was sort of the angle of that story, the first story from the Times. And it's when I got to meet Darvin Ham at the end of his 3-game or 4-game stint playing with Talk and Text in the PBA quarterfinals one year when they lost. And so, but the second story was the one that got more attention. That was a story that even more well known and obvious, I think, to basketball fans in the Philippines and UAAP and college basketball fans, especially the rivalry of Ateneo LaSalle, which was, I mean, when I arrived in the country, maybe the first thing, I think maybe before I even set foot on Philippine soil, people I would meet in the States, and if they were, either visiting New York and I was working at the bar where my father worked, I'd meet them and say, "Oh, I'm going to the Philippines." They say, "Oh, Ateneo LaSalle." We're LaSalle, so don't write about Ateneo, or the exact opposite. So that had planted that seed in my head very early on, and everyone I continued to meet involved in the sport during my research kept talking about it, and it seemed to be something and so I was able to sell that story to the Times as well. And yeah, it was. I remember it did show up on whatever trending rail the New York Times had on their website at the time, and I couldn't believe it. I was like, my story is there along with all these with his it was the time of George W. Bush and Iraq War and big, a different time in the world, but my news didn't seem like big news. But I guess for US news audiences, it was an early indication of the power of Filipino fandom, and how it can be harnessed with online audiences.
Oo, and parang you invented Pinoy dating with that article, and you invented Pinoy representatives in US sports media, people like Pablo Torre and Cassidy Hubbard and Jason Concepcion, di ba? Hindi pa uso yung mga Pinoy sa pages ng New York Times, and now they're writing about fandom, about Jordan Clarkson, for example, and maybe others. But siguro for people who might not be familiar with your journey, bago ka pa lang na writer noon, rating mo pa lang sa Pilipinas noon, you haven't written your book. What were you thinking about when you came in? Talagang basketball na ba yung goal mo to write about? I know you fancied yourself as not just a writer but an athlete. How did you get into that Ateneo LaSalle community to write that deeply about it at the time?
Sa umpisa, I was I came with a US Fulbright grant, and it was specifically yung paksa basketball mismo, the history, the social history of basketball. I studied journalism at Northwestern University, so in my head, I was always approaching it as a journalist, as a writer of hopefully sort of magazine style journalism, features, narrative, nonfiction, whatever label, long form you want to attach to it over the years. But for an academic grant, I had to dress it up a little bit and make it so. That's why we called it a social history of basketball sa Pilipinas. But I was coming in with, and I was I had a faculty advisor at Ateneo, who was the great broadcaster Sev Sarmenta, who was taught legions of sports and other media people who've come through Ateneo as well in the Department of Communications there. So I was always pretty inside my heart. I was still thinking of it as a writer and a journalist. But basketball was the reason. I had encountered a chapter in a book by a Sports Illustrated writer, another American writer named Alexander Wolf. The book was called Big Game, Small World. He's traveling all around the world and all around the United States to different places that have an interesting basketball story. And there's one chapter in there about the Philippines that just blew my mind. Like you said, I fancied myself. I knew already quite early on na, hindi ako magiging professional na kahit anong athlete. But I still played. Look, I played this morning. I'm still out there shooting for no reason other than it makes me feel good. But so I had fancied myself this person who really loved basketball. Felt like the air I breathed growing up, and I had no real clue about what basketball meant in the Philippines, the history of the sport, the role it played in society then and still now in some of the same in different ways. And so reading just that one chapter about it where it's describing the obvious images that everyone knows in the country, but really, para sa amin sa labas, parang, wow, kakaiba yan. Like people, playing in bare feet, playing in chinelas, banking your own basketball hoops, all of those. And granted, I know that now is a particularly bad time to, for foreigners to wax poetic about the resilience of the Filipino spirit. But there is an element of that stuck out to me as an impressionable, young guy in his early 20s, looking to find out what I wanted to do with my life after college. And also just the idea that this country that I knew sort of just the very basics you could learn about, being someone who's growing up, all the way on the other side of the world, who doesn't have personal connections at that point in time to the Philippines, and is, really didn't know anything about basketball there. All of a sudden I'm reading about, wow, there was, Senator Robert Jaworski was, playing until he is 52 years old and they wouldn't let him retire. And, and all of this, it made me want to come, I had to go see it for myself and was lucky enough to get a research grant to do it. So yeah, it really was always basketball that brought me first to the Philippines and then sort of served as a skeleton key for me to experience, I think, so many other aspects of, life and society in the country over the subsequent first, living in the country for 3 or 4 years before I moved back to the States. And then after that, traveling back and forth to continue writing about and working on stories about Philippine basketball. And now often just to, visit my friends like sometimes Jaemark or people in basketball, yung mga inaanak ko sa bandang Katipunan, the Loyola Heights folks that are awaiting their pasalubong and t-shirt when I come home or when I come back, all of those things. So basketball is sort of at the root of it all.
I wouldn't presume na impluwensya yun ng Pilipinas, no? Pero ang daming bagay na sinulat mo sa libro mo na parang inadapt na ng mga ibang bansa. Like for example, itong sa college basketball sa Pilipinas, nakita natin the past few years, the NCAA adopted NIL rules that basically allowed schools to pay players, which is something that we've known to have been happening in the Philippines for the longest time. There have been recruitment wars, and we hear stories of condos and cars, etc., etc. What do you make of that? Na parang the rest of the basketball world is becoming more like the Philippines. Not saying it's our influence, but parang yun yung natural state na pinatutunguhan nitong mundo.
I mean, it's impossible not to observe and acknowledge the way that U.S. college sports, our NCAA, has taken on, has allowed the professionalism, at least the ability to make money off of one's, being able to take endorsements, name, image, and likeness. So before, it was a strict rule in the U.S. for my entire youth, for decades, that a college athlete in the States had to remain amateur, meaning they could not make any money off of their ability as a player. So they couldn't be paid directly to play. They couldn't be paid in kind with condos or automobiles or per diem or even FNB. Right? You can't have it.
Or even endorsements, shoe deals, for example. They can't even get free shoes unless it's a deal with the school.
So it followed, and the Philippine college system was interesting because it always felt like a hybrid of or a mix. It's completely its own system, and it still is, where there were some aspects of the at least spirit of amateurism and the value of a college education that I think we should also probably point out that outside of the United States and the Philippines, I'm not sure, and please correct me, I'm not sure if I can name another example, especially in basketball, of a country that where their top level sports, where the best amateur athletes are the ones who aren't ready to go pro yet, are playing in that sort of system where they're expected to be amateurs on some level, but maybe they can, at least in the UAAP and the NCAA in Manila and CESAFI in Visayas, if they are, they have to be student athletes, but also can make some money on the side. They're also, everyone is sort of aware that the best players are being receiving some sort of living allowance that may or may not be significant, and but outside in other countries, it's like, no, we have these the European club system, which works pretty well, where, hey, your career is going to be as an athlete. Come here. You'll learn to be an athlete. We'll teach you how to read and write and do basic arithmetic or whatever else they learn. And obviously some athletes are going to be more academically inclined and probably will continue to study and have go farther in their academic careers than others. But that's not you're there. If your goal is to be an athlete, your goal is to be an athlete. There's this, in the US and to some extent also in the Philippines, of course, I think we should acknowledge, because where does the NCAA in the Philippines come from? I mean, and where does, why did basketball arrive in the Philippines before many other nations? It's because of the American colonial experience. So it has these similarities to at least what college sports in the United States was supposed to mean, that were implemented during the colonial years, and then you see it sort of the college game and the system in the Philippines develop on its own, to where, okay, players, we know that they can get endorsements. They have sort of the NIL. They always had NIL rights, like U.S. players couldn't have, and then the U.S. catches up. I don't think it was directly because of the Philippines, or, you know what, there are probably some netizens out there who believe that the spark that started this all was so that Kai Soto could play for the University of Kentucky, like John Calipari wanted him to back in the day. But all water under the bridge now. But anyway, it is interesting to see the U.S. arriving here, and also the U.S. system is still very confusing, right? They haven't figured out what are the terms under which players can just be paid to, pay for play. How do we determine what is a real endorsement deal versus just a no-show endorsement deal, which is even becoming an issue thanks to the reporting of Philam journalist Pablo Torre. Is now a huge deal in the NBA. What is a no-show contract? What does that mean?
Right. Pati yung PBA style salary cap violations ginagaya na rin ng NBA. So si Steve Ballmer may natutunan sa mga Filipino business
mga kampiyon sa pagkakalusot.
So it's been 18 years since you wrote that article. What has changed about Philippine college basketball? One thing that stands out to me is that panahon na yan, wala pang imports, wala pang foreign student athletes, or at least wala pang recruitment ng foreign student athletes mostly from Africa. Dati may pang isa-isa like si Kirk Long, diba? Or si Moriah Gingrich na nagkataon na nandito sa Pilipinas. So sinama sila sa lineup. Pero in the years since, there has been heavier recruitment about foreign student athletes. Before we go into that, and we'll mention our old friend, what else have you seen change about Philippine college basketball and Philippine basketball in general in the 18 years since you wrote that piece?
So in the college game specifically, I think there was the college game already had this because of the passion of alumni networks. I think because also and this wasn't as evident at the time. I think 20 years ago, but there was a special because college basketball season, at least the official UAAP and NCAA seasons, are so short in the Philippines, right? It's 14 game schedule for the UAAP, followed by such a short playoffs, right? Semifinals with a twice to beat, then finals. 3 games. Bilis lang, and it had that appointment viewing feel that I think Americans understand in the context of the NFL, professional football here, where it's a shorter season, only less than 20 games, and then playoffs, and every game matters. And there was that excitement that came around every win and loss in a UAAP season. So that was that you noticed already. And then I think it has that over time as the media environment, and this affects all forms of media and entertainment, but we're looking at it in terms of professional basketball and sports entertainment. The way the amount of inventory, the length of the PBA season, the fact that it's on 3-4 times a week, double headers, it's just always on. You can't keep up with it as much as you try for someone who has a job or that isn't following the PBA. That over time, it seems like has contributed to the PBA sort of losing some of its crowd share, or a significant portion of its crowd share in terms of the pop culture awareness of high level basketball in the country. Whereas college basketball, particularly the UAP, I think because of the elite nature of the schools, you have the top universities in the country with really powerful and well-known and famous fans supporting them and showing up at the games to cheer them on, and just the passion of the students who actually make the games feel like this incredible environment. That's become the point that's held on to its cultural value in a way that has been pretty impressive over the years, whereas the PBA keeps trying a 4-point shot, or more. Okay, we're going to have fewer field foreign players, not more field foreign players. We're it's like Asian imports. Bring in what's his Tanshir from Mongolia, my favorite Asian import. But it was
Bay Area Dragons.
Look, that was pretty fun. Yeah. I enjoyed that conference.
Yeah.
But and I don't think that I think it's a structural issue. I don't think it's that ang galing ng college, the leaders of college basketball, they really so much foresight. They knew where media and culture was going to be in the position that they would still have this prime mover effect during season. I think it's just it's structural. They have a shorter season. It feels more important. They have built-in, very dedicated fan bases in the PBA. It's Hinebra lang, no? There's almost nothing left.
Yeah. Actually, mali yung sagot mo, kasi the biggest thing that has changed in the 18 years is dalawang beses na nag-champion UP after years and years and years na kulelat kami. But let's go to what I mentioned earlier about foreign student athletes. Recently, our old friend Kinito Henson made some sports headlines by suggesting that the UAAP ban foreign student athletes dahil mercenaries daw itong mga to. Imports daw itong mga to. He wasn't making this case when Ben Embala was leading LaSalle to championships, but now he's anti-foreign student athletes. What do you think of that take? Nauna na yung NCAA to ban FSAs
right.
before.
So for when I heard Kinito's comments on Naveen Ganglani's podcast from a couple of weeks ago, so I started seeing them show up on social media. While I understood why people were why they were controversial, why people were reacting to it, I also felt like this argument, this debate has been ongoing for a very long time, and nothing that Quinito said really shocked me or seemed out of step with what people had said before, or with a strain of belief within sort of the more traditional, I guess we would say maybe old school Philippine basketball mindset, where it was more insular, it was more protectionist, more closed borders. We are when the mindset then, I think, and you can still see, I mean, I think that in some ways Coach, Yang Giao in the PBA, as he's the head of the Philippine Coaches Association, has been for years, and he tends to advocate for this issue more in terms of coaching. But there's this desire to say that, hey, we built, that we over time, Filipinos, the Philippines, have built this sport into a special thing in this country that you don't see quite the same way in other countries, both in the way that fans support it, that players, that Filipino players are supported all over the world wherever they play, that that when in FIBA games, when, I mean, you see when they play in Saudi Arabia, and there's a Gilas Pilipinas game, who's in the crowd, it's all OFWs coming from Jeddah and Riyadh and probably UAE as well, traveling to see these games. So that there's this desire to protect the culture that they've built and continue to elevate home, quote unquote homegrown talent. I understand it. It's also, I think it's too late. The world is too different. The basketball world has changed now. The amount of border crossing that happens for players wherever they're from, the European players, American players, who have always played as imports, right? I mean, who are the imports in the PBA in the 70s and the Mika before the PBA? American guys who would find their way over to the country, so they're all, basketball globalization is something that I think the Philippines at this point in time would be, resisting at its own peril. And as far as foreign student athletes in college basketball, I guess in the UAP now goes, I think there's never been a rule that allowed more than one a foreign player on the court at the same time. So that's still a pretty strict regulation on the amount of influence they're giving away to foreign talent. And beyond that, there's just no sort of, if you think of just like on a human sort of legal basis, other than this is our thing and this is our club and you're not allowed in it, there's no real argument to keep people out. Assuming that a player has arrived, or a student, right? You're enrolled in the school wherever you're from. You're enrolled in La Salle. You're enrolled in UE.
Dapat pwede. Why stop at one, di ba? Kung estudyante
you're a
in La
student,
Salle,
right?
diba?
This is the team that represents the school. You go to the school. You meet whatever eligibility requirements. There's no. I don't think there's any argument that would hold up if challenged. Now, I mean, then we get into the question of courts and how reliable they always are. But let's pretend it's a always rational system. There is no rational basis to bar these players. And to listen, that was the thing that stuck out to me most, listening to Quinito's recent comments. Not that they were unreasonable. Not the idea that the desire to protect Philippine basketball. I sympathize with that, because part of me, I'm like, well, I fell in love with with Philippine basketball. I want that culture that exists only in the Philippines is something that I don't want to see slowly sort of diluted and dissolved into this sort of melting pot of world basketball. But I think that the country can be confident enough that Filipino players are good enough to learn and get better and compete with international talent, that the culture that grew over more than a century of basketball being played in the country is resilient enough to still be strong, no matter how many foreign players are allowed to participate. And in fact, we see that Filipino players are now honestly coveted as imports in other Asian leagues in Japan and Korea. So Filipino basketball culture is strong even in a global environment that I think the country's basketball leaders, who are often of an older, more traditional mindset, probably it's time to they've made concessions to it. I think it may be time to just embrace it. And again, in the college game, and this happens not just in basketball, not just in the UAP, not just in the PBA. This is true of a lot of aspects of, I mean, Philippine culture, American culture, all around the world you find it. But it's the double speak, right? There's, okay, the UAP is this special, pure garden of school spirit and passion, and it cannot be corrupted by mercenary imports and foreign student athletes. Well, we all know that's not true. And I honestly think one thing I appreciate about what Quinito said, let's call them, if they are import is a perfectly acceptable term for the role that foreign student athletes play on their UAAP teams. They're the import. That's the term that has traditionally existed for a foreign player that comes to the country to reinforce the local team. That's an import. That's and there's no question that players are being recruited for this from, whether it, go back to the days of Sam Ekwe in San Beda, whether American, the late rest in peace Sudan Daniel, playing after Sam for San Beda, and then other teams, sort of following that lead and finding talent from around the world, Ben Mbala, Kareem Abdul, Charles Mami, all on and on and on. There's finding those players are recruited, and those players are at least on some level incentivized, whether it's through condos, whether it's through an allowance, whether it's through just the opportunity to get a college degree, being taken care of, put up in a place while they study. Yeah, they're recruited and incentivized. They're imports. You didn't need to come up with a name like FSA to soften it. I think we can accept that it's okay that these players, they come in, they go to school, they probably get a lot out of the experience. They certainly get a lot out of playing. It's okay to refer to them as imports. It's also okay to for us to accept and know that on some level, the UAAP team, the teams competing for championships in the UAAP are not doing so through the virtue of their alumni bodies, and how many important positions and government positions and leaders of business and all the great things that UP and La Salle and Ateneo and UST grads go on to do. It's because they are recruiting and incentivizing, usually paying in some way, the best players to come join their teams. It is semi-professional. And the idea, the sort of the double speak I noticed between, at La Salle, we don't poach players. We wait for them to make the first move. Okay, let's assume that's true. What difference does it make? Player movement is going to happen unless you're going, and it has all, and it's not new, right? We talk about that 2007 Ateneo La Salle story for the New York Times. What was everyone complaining to me, or the historic, the story that everyone would bring up back then about the previous eras, huge controversy. BJ Manalo, Ateneo product for all these years goes to La Salle. We hate that guy, BJ Manalo. Oy, Taksil, and that's why did he go there? You think it's just because he did he live south and wanted to go to school in Taft? I don't know, maybe, but there was probably some more in it for him than that. And La Salle is also,
we all heard that,
also rumors. By then recruiting outstanding Phil-Am players from the States who probably were given more than a hope and a dream to come play after their high school careers in the States, whether it's Don Oliado, Mike Cortez, Manny Ramos. Yeah. Mike Cortez, obviously the biggest star, I think, to name there, but for a while, Willie Wilson, Alvin Castro. I mean, it was a Phil-Am heavy team in that dynasty era for Coach Franz Pumaren and La Salle. In any case, all I mean is this: I think fans understand the reality of recruiting players, paying players, whether in kind, and it can be done in the open. In fact, doing it in the open probably makes the system make more sense and makes people enjoy it more than having to pretend that everything is done one extreme pure way and having a reality that is I don't even pure isn't even a good term, right? It's what is wrong with these players who are sort of they're athletes who go through a college system en route to being professional athletes,
but also make
right?
money.
It doesn't and for it to be, well, it's okay if they get billboards, if Kobe Paras and Kai Soto get billboards, if L.A. Tenorio has a Nike deal when he's in middle school or high school, whatever. Sure. For all of those, it's okay if that, but as long as the school isn't directly paying them, but well, our donor is, our patron is. So I think and granted, look, this is not gonna. I don't think it's gonna change. I'm not naive here, and it is sort of a matter, I think, of I don't know, delicadeza, not necessarily a good example of it, but it's there's sort of no one wants to say up front that players can get paid, but in the grand scheme of ethically questionable activity in the world, not just in the Philippines, I mean anywhere, and this is true in the United States too. College athletes getting paid is not a crazy thing. I mean, Alex Ayala, right, who happens to be a tennis star, can start making money at age whatever age she's can command a deal, right? And so when he was a chess prodigy, Wesley So, he's allowed to compete as make grandmaster and compete in world tournaments and make and earn and get endorsements at that time. All of if you're a concert pianist, a great someone in any other kind, in sort of these less non-team sports, often more that attracts talent from more elite backgrounds. Then it's okay, yeah, great, good for you, you're a prodigy, go make money at age 12. But for basketball players, for whatever reason, it's like, we can't be doing this.
Do you think it's a certain strain of fan who likes being lied to? Kasi naisip ko, meron pa rin college basketball team na tuwan-tuwa sa coach nila na ang excuse for not making the finals the past 2 years, ang taas kasi ng academic standards na school namin. Kaya yung mga players namin, hirap na hirap mag-perform sa basketball court. I mean, and it's the same strain of fan that, Kinito Henson was talking to in that interview na, hindi, dapat pure, dapat straight, dapat ethical yung pag-recruit natin, hindi tayo nagpo-poach. Even coming from the university that was most notorious for poaching players in its history, diba?
It seems that way, right? Yeah. I know what school you're talking about. And there are differences in academic standards throughout. If you compare the different UAP schools to each other, probably. I believe that's true of some colleges in the States where even though their goal is to compete at the highest academic level, or the highest athletic level with their teams. It's the school like Stanford or where I went, Northwestern. Right. There were some famous examples of players they could.
Kaya rin ba kayo hindi malakas sa basketball palagi dahil mataas ang academic standards? Naalala ko, I was there was a former coach of my college team, and he was anti-NIL dahil daw pag nagkaroon ng NIL, or if you allow colleges to pay players, it's only all the big schools who would get the best players. And gusto kong sabihin sa kanya, all the big schools already get the best players in the States. It doesn't matter whether you pay them or not. They're gonna flock to the biggest schools, and the players are getting paid whether or not above the table siya o
Right.
under the
And
table.
also, I mean, the experience so far of NIL in the States, especially in what is, the second most popular American sport, which is college football, where players have to stay in college a little bit longer before they're allowed to enter the NFL compared to the NBA age limit. So there you see NIL has had almost the opposite effect that of those who predicted things along those lines, where the teams that were able to find one or two very wealthy, very generous donors have been able to improve and compete. And there have been more upsets. Alabama, which is the, one for the last 10 years,
Right.
you just pencil them in. Oh, they're going to win the football championship. Now they haven't been winning. They're competing. They're close. They have a chance, but it's actually leveled the playing field a little bit more by allowing more open forms of paying players and saying, and before, players, I think in that example, in the Alabama example, even if they weren't going to be first string on the field all the time, they go there because, well, when I get my chance there, at least I can go pro after that. Now they're getting a chance to play some other school that can pay them a little bit, or can pay them a lot, frankly, in the meantime, and actually make a name for themselves there. So that hasn't been the experience so far in the U.S. For the UAP, the idea of purity in the UP, pure student athlete experience, pure competition, I think that has always been overstated. I think most fans understand that and know that. It's hard to believe that the most involved and dedicated fans of a team who follow probably the developments of their team's recruiting, of they're watching UAP juniors, they're seeing who's coming up, would then believe that all of the outstanding talent that somehow comes to their team is not is just going there out of the academic and historic reputation of the academy. Of course, that's great in these cases. That's great for Ateneo. It's great for Salle. It's great for UP. It's great for UST. It's great for you go through the entire UAP. I know people say Big Four, but they're all great schools.
As a UP fan, I'm under no illusion that all these great players are going to UP for the Rodix Tapsilog.
I would. That's how you get me. Sarap din yung sinigang.
Anyway, pati yung kaldereta nila masarap. Balik tayo, you mentioned earlier the concept of the globalization of basketball. In the Philippines, that sort of happened in the late 90s during what you called in your book and what sports writers call the Phil-Am invasion. Naalala ko yung na-realize ko kung gaano ka-stark yung difference recently. I was telling you about how I was watching the 1998 Centennial team that competed in the Asian Games. It was coached by our friend Tim Cohn, the greatest Philippine basketball coach ever. But it was interesting when the Philippines was playing China. It was the biggest Philippine team ever assembled at the time. Pero kita mo dun sa laro, takot na takot yung mga Pinoy sa size ng China. I remember basketball geekery na Tim started Alvin Patrimonio, a power forward, at the 3 spot just to match up size-wise with China. And so the Philippines was killed on the break because while they were able to match up size-wise, weren't able to match up speed-wise. So that was before the Phil-Am invasion. And after that, parang nasanay na yung mga Pinoy basketball players sa size. Kung matatandaan mo, during the first few years of the invasion, it was all Phil-Ams dominating the league. But a few years later, it was guys like James Yap, Kirby Raimundo, Enrico Villanueva, diba? Winning Willie Miller, your guy. And so it took maybe PBA players 5 years, 6 years, less than 10 years to adjust to the talent influx. What do you make of that? And did you see that dumating ka rito, tail end na nung Phil-Am invasion na yan, and then nag-emerge na ulit yung mga Pinoy, di ba?
Yeah, and now you see in fact, the change that I remember witnessing sort of happening in real time was uh the adjustment that Phil Am and Phil Foreign players were having to make, coming from, the West Coast, from New Jersey, from Toronto, from from, in some cases, Germany and Switzerland. Shout out to Mike Bircher. They they would who I saw often before they entered the PBA draft, and they were trying to build up their name in the country, playing in the PBL or in Liga Pilipinas back then. And it was hard. They were the ones struggling to adjust to the style and skill and just the physicality, the differences in Philippine basketball compared to the world game or the US game that they were used to from back home, where you come in thinking, oh, I watched this on tape. One of my favorite stories, and he was part of the one of the in the early phases of what I guess that Phil Am invasion. Invasion seems strong to say, but let's yeah. Influx,
Well,
yeah.
it was.
But
Yeah.
see, Tony De La
Yeah.
Cruz, one of the things he told me when he remembered when he was in college at UC Irvine, playing there, and someone showed him tape of a PBA game, and he looked at it and was like, I am going to destroy this league. And he came over, and it took him years, he said, to find his footing and eventually become an excellent PBA player. But he was a direct hire, highly coveted Phil Am prospect because of his D1 experience, and wow, this guy is going to be really something special. And he came in and struggled early on in his career. And just that adjustment process. So I was witness in the time that I spent around the PBA really closely, from in 2006 and 2008-9, when I was embedding with Alaska and interviewing players as much as I possibly could, putting together material for Pacific Rims. In that time, it was really about Phil Am and Phil Forum players adjusting to the PBA. So the other thing that almost every player, any player you ask, and si Kiefer Ravena said this on Nav's podcast, in response to Quinito, that from the perspective of any player, and almost I think every coach I've ever spoken to, they all said they got better playing against foreign talent, whether it was adjusting to size, whether it was getting used to the way that other players move, the dribble moves that American players were, I think, more advanced in the late 90s and 20, 25 years ago. And especially back then, you couldn't. There was no easy way to watch video of what of how a player breaks down his crab dribble, his step back, his whatever unstoppable move of the day is. Watching it on video and trying to copy it like that wasn't possible at the time. So you needed that physical person-to-person interaction for the transfer of skill and knowledge, and it went both ways. And so they all say it's important. So people involved in the sport are generally all extremely competitive, believe in their ability to beat anyone they face, even if probably deep down they know they should probably lose. And they want those challenges. So players and coaches are usually in favor of that sort of opening. And then it's the people outside the game who worry, well, what if it's too much too soon? How are the local player? What about the local players who aren't going to get a roster spot because there's an import now, or the the Phil Foreign players who are taking away roster spots from homegrown Filipino players. And that's true. One good thing, I think, or one great thing about Philippine basketball culture is it's so strong and there's so much desire for the sport, that there are more opportunities, I would say, for Filipino basketball players who don't quite make it to the PBA to have careers and to continue supporting, contributing to their livelihoods through Ligang Labas, through whatever the semi-pro or second tier league of the day is right now, the MPBL, but before, the PBL, the PBDL, whatever, all of those leagues, those they create a lot of opportunities for players to continue, to at least earn, and then now also going overseas. So the best opportunity may not go to everyone, but there's still a lot of opportunity for basketball players in the country, more so than I think than others. Where like if you're a Division III college basketball player in the States, Division II even, at the end of your college career, you basically have to figure out what to do with your life. You can't, I'm going to go, I'm going to go home to Cebu and just, the governor or, the mayor of my town will put me on his team and I'll get an allowance and it won't be PBA money, but I'll be doing pretty well. I can coach. I do. Yeah. Anyway, there's a really strong, economy of basketball in the country that has meaningful lower levels that allow people to make a living and support their families.
Yeah. Yun, wala pa yun nung sinulat mo yung libro mo. You covered some Ligang Labas, but it wasn't quite at the level it is now. Nakikita natin yung social media clips. Sometimes they have more views than, PBA highlights or even UAAP highlights, diba? Na yung Mavs basketball. Tsaka, you've got Mark Pingris challenging Rendon to a one-on-one game. What do you make of that whole rise of this influencer basketball leagues and the whole social media phenomenon of all these lower level leagues that have, for some reason, I don't know if I get it, but they've been able to create stars or at least generate interest.
Stars. Themselves. I mean, I know the name of Popoy. Like I've seen his dunks. Like I know Mavs Fino. I like when I'm in Manila, I'm looking on Shopee and Lazada, being like, hey, maybe I should get this jersey because I see it online. Yeah.
I sent you the clips of Mr. Longbomb.
So Mr. Longbomb. I guess I'm a little too old school or a little too pure in I want my basketball players to at least seem like they're playing a version of the sport that looks real to me, for me to get fully on board. But I think that that genre of content that was thriving, like the dial games, like you'd see, that really, I think, Mavs Phenomenal was the phenomenon that made that a trend in the country. I mean, they're fun videos. You get to know the players. I think it's a media story as much. It's a media story and a basketball story, right? Because it is people figuring out how to take advantage of YouTube, of TikTok, of the ways to build a platform and build a brand, even though they're not playing in the PBA. They have some talent that, whether you're a great dunker, whether you're Mr. Longbomb and you can hit these bizarre, crazy shots and do whatever in your games. It's the kind of thing that it's a curiosity. You want to see it, and also just while it is not a style, I think it is not a style of basketball that certainly not one I enjoyed playing in my time, bouncing around basketball courts in the Philippines, and certainly one that can be tough to watch. The super physical Dayo game where it's guys just holding each other, wrestling, no one's allowed to move, and you get the big all caps display copy on YouTube being like, Pisikalan sa wherever, Tondo or in Masbate or whatever. It's like you see guys just beating the hell out of each other on a basketball court, refusing to let anyone shoot. It's interesting, and it's I don't know, I wouldn't have expected it necessarily to become more popular, at least in terms of views, than almost any kind of basketball content in the country. I bet that you could put some of the the top Mavs phenomenal videos up against NBA content in the Philippines, and it would do better. It's and it's because I think that comes from the country's love of the sport. Also, the ability. The one thing that one of the structural issues that has always been difficult for the PBA and UAP and NCAA college basketball, they can't bring the sport around the country to the level that to meet the demand that exists. So of course, when there's a PBA goes out of town to Bacolod, to Lapu-Lapu City, to to Vigan, wherever, they're doing. You'll see the crowds are way more intense and into the games than in Manila, where it's the same people. You see the same handful of people at the game every time, and maybe a few extras depending on if it's a playoff game or if it's Ginebra.
Maybe some DPWH contractors at courtside for the big games.
The Dio games, the content creators, they're traveling road shows. The PBA moto clubs with Rico Meyerhofer and his gang, JJ. That's the whole thing. And before that, there was the model, even though it was pre-content, it was just sort of the barnstorming fiesta tour, was the San Miguel All-Stars, who, I mean, that was one of the some of the greatest pickup games or open runs I ever got invited to in my life, was playing with Ronnie Magsanok in the SMB All Stars in the morning at Meralco Gym, where he's all of a sudden you get to pass to Alvin Patrimonio, and doesn't his hands are still incredible. He'll catch any ball and just flip it in. Just his touch is amazing, and you see these they're not moving as fast, but they all still have it. Jerry Esplana is like backing me up, and I'm like, what is that? I've never seen this move in my life. So the barnstorming fiesta model existed, but it got supercharged with modern media, with content creation, and outfits like Mavs Fino and PBA Moto Club took it to the next level.
Yeah. So the way I'm hearing it, no, parang there are dati naman ganun na yung pressures at the highest level of basketball, where it was always a decision whether to focus on the domestic and to reach the widest swath of fans, and just focus on the entertainment value of the game. And on the other hand, there's a pressure for the leagues to level up in terms of competitiveness in the global game. We've seen historic wins by Gilas Pilipinas, again coached by Team Cone. We beat a European team for the first time in who knows how long, maybe ever. Maybe since the days of Kaloy Saga, diba? And now we see the backlash na hindi na sustain yung ganong performance because of whatever is happening with Gilas right now. So can you siguro to end this podcast, can you put a diagnosis on the state of Philippine basketball, given those two poles, where on the one hand you have to satisfy the widest swath of fans who just want to be close to the game, and then there's the pressure to also level up and to be competitive at the global level. Parang ang tagal nang nagbabangga yun. That's the reason, for example, why the PBA was formed, because they didn't want to lend their players to the national team. So is it more of the same? And where do you see this thing going?
There are sort of multiple levels to answer a question like that. I think the baseline culture of Philippine basketball, and I mean the grassroots, remains very strong. I am very fortunate to I've been able to spend time in the country almost every year since I moved back to the States in 2009. Sometimes for months at sometimes I'll be in the Philippines or in Manila for months at a time, sometimes for just a couple of weeks, but I've been back almost every year, and I'm happy to still feel that level of connection. When I'm back recently, I still see the influence of basketball everywhere. The jerseys sold all over, the basketball on screen everywhere, on screens. It used to be the cable TV screen through the bars of the sari-sari store. Now it's on, looking over the shoulder of whoever's next to me on the MRT, but I'm still seeing basketball everywhere. And it's, I'm seeing people watching and consuming, PBA, NBA, college, like the interest, the love of the game feels like it has not diminished hardly at all. And that also includes the participation in the game. There is still a culture of just, like in people, in your barangay, whether you're, it's Manila or in the province, people are playing basketball. You hear the balls bouncing if you walk by a court, during any cool time of day, or if it's a covered court, you might hear it all day long. So there's that level, the grassroots, the passion, the love of the game, I think appears as strong as ever to me, at least in the 20 years that I've spent, first living and then traveling back and forth to the country. Then at the higher levels, there are these big changes, and they're sort of irresistible. Although, like any legacy institution, which I think the PBA certainly is 50 years old this year. It is. These legacy institutions often sort of resist the change, the sort of greater changes coming at them. And we've seen that with the PBA's resistance to letting players play overseas, keep trying to find ways to hold players back, to keep them in their contracts, to punish the rookie players who don't, want to enter the draft right away and then decide, oh, let's not do that. I think it's too late for that, both in terms of what the options available to people around the world, because even if you don't, because the leagues, the scouts from the B League in Japan, from the KBL in South Korea, from Taiwan, they see the players in the UAP. They see Kevin Kiambao. They see SJ Belangel. They see, they see RJ Abarientos before he came back to the PBA. And they're like, that guy would be really good here. And because of the strength of the Philippine basketball audience, he's also going to deliver a ton of eyeballs and views and fans from a whole nother country and basketball culture to our product. So I don't think there's any way to wall off the country and keep it out. And if one of the country's other goals in basketball is to compete to be competitive and keep rising in the FIBA ranks to get to be as whatever the reach the ceiling of potential in international competition for a Philippine national basketball team, the country can't build up walls around its basketball players and not let them have experience against the best players from the region, from around the world, from whatever the highest level they can achieve is. It doesn't make sense that way. You can't have it both ways. So I think on one hand, the growth of Gilas Pilipinas, or the national team program in general, from especially given the time that I arrived in the country, it's November 2005, the country was gearing up to host the SEA Games, and there was not going to be basketball in them because FIBA, the Philippines was suspended from FIBA at the time. To go from there to the establishment of Samahang Basketball ng Pilipinas for 2007, to get back into FIBA, compete in the FIBA Asia Championships that year with, that was when Jimmy Alapag was, the Philippines didn't, went 9th place or 8th place, but still, that was the re-entry into the world level and showed that they could really compete. It went almost, Chot and them almost beat Iran, but didn't in that tournament. So to see the growth from you're suspended to beating Latvia last year, to winning the Asian Games for Coach Tim and Brownlee and that team, winning the Asian Games after hosting the World Cup in 2023. Those achievements were unthinkable at the time. So there's been great growth. And at the same time, I share fans' frustration that you don't always get to see the team play its best. For whatever, maybe, there are these conflicts of interest between mother teams in the PBA, and who is sort of steering the ship in Gilas at one point in time, and they don't want to share all their players as much, or players not having time to train together because they're coming from all these from all these different leagues, and the PBA still has playoffs until a week before your qualifier or whatever. Those obstacles are difficult. One thing to note, that's what I think that fans from every country like to say, oh, well, it's harder for our players because Serbia can say, well, it's harder for our teams because we have to get our two best players, Bogdanovic and Jokic, to come back from the NBA, and their mother teams don't want them to. And Jokic, we know, would always rather be like riding his trotter horses than playing basketball. So it's hard to convince him to participate sometimes, although he's been, last 2 years, he's been excellent. But Serbia has its excuses, and their players are playing all over the world too. It's not like they only play in the Adriatic League. No, they're some of them are teammates of 30 Ravenna in Dubai.
Dubai.
So every country deals with those challenges in some level, and it's one of the great sort of impossible puzzles of competing at the international level, where teams sort of understand that it's rare to ever get all of their best players together playing on the same page at the same time. And the teams that manage to pull that off for a stretch of 2 or 3 years, they usually call that a golden generation. And you see, I think, Germany, which just won Eurobasket yesterday, is having a little bit of that after winning, the World Championships in Manila in 2023 and going to the semifinals of the Olympics last year. They are having that sort of moment, but it's rare that it comes along. So I think that that SBP and the Gilas program have stabilized a real competitive, regionally national program in the country. That's a huge accomplishment on its own. I think it's asking too much, and it's okay. Fans are allowed to ask too much. In fact, I think teams, the people in charge of, coaches, team managers, they want their fans to care too much, because it's a lot better than them not caring at all. When they start to lose interest, that's when I think you really have a problem. So fans caring too much is I think it's a write-off. It's part of it's what you play for. But the truth is that there are going to be moments when a player gets injured, right? Gilas, some of their recent struggles, I think it's fair, not entirely to blame, but partially, a big significant factor there is, that team was being built around Kai Soto, who we saw emerging into a great version of the player that I think fans had long hoped he would become. And he had a knee injury, and hopefully he, returns back at full force and continues on the same progression with his career. But without that player, that team looked different, and they weren't quite as competitive. They tried very hard. They didn't have a terrible result, but it was disappointing. They have to try and improve on that in the future, whether it's Coach Tim, whether it's another coach coming in, whether Coach Chot raises his hand again and is willing to go through one more round of bashing and in service of Flag and the Puso brand. All of that is on the table. But I think there's not going to be a savior. I think it's, as long as the country is putting forth competitive teams that do, that are in the conversation for medals in Asia, I think that's a good place for the Gilas program to be at currently. And if they can get to a place where they're consistently in the conversation for silvers and bronzes, and maybe Australia doesn't show up one year and they can win a tournament, then great. But it's very competitive. The world is competitive, and I guess going back to where we started with globalization, the country, certainly the national team program, needs to embrace that, because there's no way to compete again with the rest of the world, allowing players to jump back and forth between leagues, not trying to tie them down with, they're not trying to come up with artificial rules in their domestic leagues to keep them from participating, from going to a place where there's another offer, which we've seen, the PBA trying to do in some ways to players interested in playing in Japan and Korea and South Korea. With those obstacles only hold back players from the kind of opportunities, the kind of competition that will make them better and probably lead to better results on the world stage for Gilas, assuming those are some of your most talented players. You can't have it both ways.
All right. Well, that's a perfect note to end this conversation with Rafe Bartholomew. His podcast he produced for Puma Podcast, The Global Bounce, still available on Spotify. Check that out if you enjoyed this conversation. And if you liked how we spoke about basketball, uh, feel free to subscribe to our Spotify and YouTube and everywhere else you can find your podcast. And if you love this conversation, please tell a friend about it. Rafe, thank you so much for joining us, and I hope we'll see more of you on Teka Teka and Puma Podcast.
I hope so too, and thank you. It's any chance to talk, man. I appreciate it.